be soft and now you have to wait.
A bizarre story in Russellville, Arkansas today. A man who reportedly quit his job over low pay went on a shooting spree with 2 handguns. Peter Van Zandt reports.
A man armed with 2 pistols this morning went on a shooting spree in 2 Arkansas towns, killing 7 people and wounding 4 others. Police say the suspect, Gene Simmons, had just quit his job this morning at a local convenience store in Russellville, Arkansas, and then began hunting down his victims.
It looks like he knew, or at least had contact with these people at various times.
Julie Money narrowly escaped death when the suspect started firing in her office building.
And the door flew open and the man shot him just point blank in the face, and then he turned and I screamed, and he turned and he shot at me, and it just went just past my hair. I felt the heat from it, and I just dove and he took off.
Officials say Simmons barricaded himself for a time at a freight company, but then surrendered without firing on police. Several of the wounded remain hospitalized tonight, one with a gunshot to the head. Police say they haven't been able to establish a motive for the shootings, but they believe Simmons was targeting former employers. Tonight, police say Simmons is refusing to speak. Peter Van Zandt, CBS News, Atlanta.
Shock and horror mounted today as the death toll climbed following the murderous rampage of an Ozark mountain community. Officials counted 16 people dead, 14 of them members of the suspect's family. One of the victims was a young woman who reportedly spurned the alleged killer's advances. Peter Van Zandt now with today's developments.
Their worst fears came true. Searchers in the tiny Arkansas town of Dover this morning found the bodies of 9 missing members of the Gene Simmons family. 7 bodies were pulled from a freshly dug grave near the family house. 2 babies were found in garbage sacks in the trunks of these cars. But there's more. Last night, the bodies of 5 other family members who came home for the holidays were discovered throughout the house, making this killing ground the worst mass murder in Arkansas history.
We're talking about 14, 5 in the house that we found. I believe we've got 7 in the grave up here and 2 here in the cars.
The man suspected of killing all these people, Gene Simmons, is the same man who yesterday allegedly killed 2 more people and wounded 4 others in nearby Russellville, Arkansas. This morning, Simmons, who has refused to speak to police, was formally charged with 2 counts of murder.
I asked the judge to send him to the state hospital for psychiatric examination, which the judge did, and the judge didn't set a bond.
He's done nothing in his cell other than lie on the bunk with his face to the wall and just lay there.
Very little is known about Gene Simmons. Police say he didn't have a criminal record. Local residents describe him as a loner, a man who wouldn't allow his family to socialize with the outside world.
Never seen anyone like him, you know. I know about everybody in Polk County, and I ain't never seen anyone weird as he is.
You never did know them, you know, you couldn't get to know them. They was quiet people.
Quiet, withdrawn, words used to describe many of Simmons' 7 children, pictured here in their school yearbooks. Investigators believe Simmons murdered half of his family shortly before Christmas, killing the others as they entered his home for a holiday visit. Unopened presents were found in the house, as were the bloody signs of struggle. Tonight, shocked investigators have one major unanswered question.
Why?
Sure.
Why?
Gene Simmons may be the only man with the answer, and tonight he's not talking. Peter Van Zandt, CBS News, Dover, Arkansas.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, Bruce Morton reports on
9 more bodies found this morning in Dover. The victims may be the wife, children, and grandchildren of the gunman. The toll now stands at 16 dead in an Arkansas murder case.
And now, Arkansas's own Eyewitness News at 6. With Roy Mitchell, Carolyn Long, Tom Bonner's weather, and Dave Woodman's sports, and the entire Eyewitness News team.
What happened in Pope County has stunned Arkansas and has rocked the nation. A mass murder of almost unbelievable proportions. 16 dead, including 14 who may be members of the same family. It all started yesterday with a shooting spree in Russellville that left 2 people dead and 4 people wounded. Then last night, police discovered 5 bodies inside a home in Dover. And today, the grisly recovery of 9 more bodies. We begin our coverage tonight with Stacey Allison in Dover.
Police lines went up just after daybreak this morning as deputies prepared to search for more bodies. They found nothing in the pond, but just a few feet away, someone spotted what looked like a grave. And 2 feet below the ground, a body.
Hold it. There it is.
Not one body, but 7, stacked one on top of the other. Police brought them out in body bags. They believe they are Simmons' wife, Becky, his son, Gene Simmons Jr. of El Paso, a grandchild, and 4 of Simmons' younger children still living at home. 17-year-old Loretta, 15-year-old Eddie, 10-year-old Marianne, and 8-year-old Becky. The sheriff was visibly shaken.
Emotionally, fellas, you never get used to it. You never get used to it. And I have a job to do, and I try to hold up and do that job.
Police believe those in the grave were killed first, possibly Wednesday or Thursday. Then the 5 in the house arrived from out of town. Police say they were probably killed immediately, and along with them, 2 grandchildren, each about 2 years old, found later today in the separate trunks of 2 cars at the house.
Few in this community knew what went on inside of this wall. Neighbors say Gene Simmons and his family lived here in virtual seclusion. So many are not surprised that 14 people could be murdered here Christmas week in secret.
But the killings didn't stop here at the secluded house. 2, Jim Chafin and Kathy Kendrick, were murdered publicly in Russellville on Monday morning, bringing the total number of bodies to 16. Julie Money says she missed Simmons' bullet during a Monday morning shooting spree.
I said, when he looked at me with that gun and pointed that gun on me, he had this just horrid grin on his face. And he looked mad. He just looked mad, and like a mad dog would look at you.
A mad dog, a recluse, a weirdo, and a nice guy. All descriptions of this man. So far, Gene Simmons has said nothing to police, showed no emotion, except at the mention of family.
When they would mention where his family was at, how we could contact his family, and this kind of thing, the investigator said the only thing then that he saw was his bottom lip would quiver.
And the community is quivering too. Those who knew the family feel fear when they think of 16 murders in their small community and no motive.
It's right next door, just a couple houses down, and it was late before we ever got in bed, and I just laid there. I could see those kids' faces. It was scary.
Stacey Allison, Channel 4 Eyewitness News.
The Supreme Court has ruled that states may execute death row inmates who don't want to appeal their sentences. That decision means Ronald Gene Simmons can be put to death for killing 14 relatives and 2 acquaintances during a 1987 rampage in Arkansas. But the court's action does little to end the debate over the death penalty.
Their impatience now leads them to prefer finality of a death sentence to the point of an execution rather than appropriate safeguards and constitutional standards.
I'm pleased with the decision. I think it's important in the instance that it doesn't open the door for anyone who is opposed to the death penalty to challenge any death case just to delay or try to deny the process.
The court ruled that outsiders have no right to block an execution if the condemned person wants to die without an appeal.
December 22, 1987, Ronald Gene Simmons began a massacre that became known as the worst family murder case in Arkansas history and the worst crime involving one family in the history of the country. His rampage finally came to a halt December 28, 1987, with 14 of his immediate family members and 2 former co-workers dead and 4 others wounded. Just days before Christmas, 1987, after the little ones were off to school, Simmons drove into town and bought a .22 caliber handgun at the local Walmart. He came back home and shot his oldest son, Gene Jr., then his wife, Becky. After that, he strangled Gene Jr.'s 3-year-old daughter, Barbara. He left the bodies in the room and sat down to watch TV and to wait for the 4 youngest to arrive home from school. By 4 o'clock, Simmons could see his children coming up the hill. He greeted them outside with a smile and told them he had a surprise for each of them. He began with his oldest, Loretta. Simmons made the other three wait in the car outside, listening to Christmas carols. Simmons lured Loretta into his bedroom and locked the door behind her. He wrapped a nylon cord around her neck and held it tight until her body went limp. Next were Eddie, then Mary Ann, then little Becky. All were killed the same way. Afterwards, Simmons dumped all the bodies into the privy pit.
One of the deputies, he was a lieutenant at the time, Dillard Bradley, found a spot there that had been, it was obvious it had been freshly dug. It had been covered up with some scrap iron. And he moved that and found that that had been freshly dug. We cordoned that area off and began digging. There was some barbed wire and there were some rocks and things like that on it. And so we had to kind of sort through that, and of course we thought very possibly it was a grave because we knew there were family members missing. Once we started digging down, then we found the first, hate to call it rose, but I guess you'd call it rose. The whole grave was probably, I'm going to say probably, I'm sure, trying to go by memory now, but I'm going to say it was around 5 feet deep probably. And the bodies had been thrown in just on top of each other.
The older Simmons children came home on December 26th for the Christmas dinner he had promised with the extended family. This
was the first time ever that all of the family was going to be together. And I think we all felt like there was a concern that some of the family might be, including her, might be leaving after this gathering.
Simmons was waiting on them. The first to arrive home would be 23-year-old Billy, his 21-year-old wife, Renetta, and their 20-month-old son, Trey. Simmons met them at the door with his .22 pistol, shooting Billy and Renetta, then strangling Trey. Simmons covered their bodies with their own jackets and placed them on the dining room floor. The last to arrive was 24-year-old Sheila, her husband, 33-year-old Dennis McNulty, as well as 7-year-old Sylvia Gale, the daughter of Sheila and Simmons, and 21-month-old Michael, the son of Sheila and Dennis. One by one, he killed them in the same manner as he did the others. He laid Sheila's body on the dining room table, then covered her with a tablecloth. He wrapped the two babies in trash bags and placed them in the trunks of 2 old cars.
He had shot some people in Russellville. Some had died. Most had just been injured. He used a .22 pistol.
He first drove to the Peel and Eddy law firm, where he shot and killed his former co-worker, 24-year-old Kathy Kendrick. Next, Simmons continued to Taylor Oil Company, where he killed 33-year-old J.D. Chaffin and wounded another worker. After that, his next stop was at a Sinclair mini-mart, where Simmons quit his job just 2 days prior. There he shot and wounded 2 others. Simmons' last stop would be Woodline Motor Freight, where he would give himself up.
Whatever happened at the house, and then it just sort of appeared like, well, you know, he's done all of this and he knew probably he would go to prison, and so he might as well just take care of any other issues that he had. And basically that's what he said when he was arrested, was he was through. I'm done.
Simmons was taken into custody and later charged with 16 counts of murder and sentenced to death.
It would be comforting to think that the movie Silence of the Lambs was pure fiction. It wasn't. It was based on real crimes in a real FBI unit, which is known affectionately as the Psycho Squad. We went to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, to see how the unit gets into the minds of some of the most savage serial killers and rapists, and to meet the head of the unit, FBI agent John Douglas. What I wanted to ask you about first was the movie. Did you like it?
I thought it was a tremendous movie. It was scary as heck.
You were scared?
Oh, sure.
That's great. That's
and,
great.
Because unlike the real cases, in the real cases, we don't have the music in the background. and these,
in the movie, Douglas was played by actor Scott Glenn.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Crawford.
Sorry to pull you off the course at such short notice. The job's come up, and I thought about you.
Not a job, really, more of an interesting errand.
As in the movie, Douglas and the other agents in his behavioral science unit, one of them played by Jodie Foster, visit prisons and interview convicted rapists and murderers to find out how they committed their vicious crimes and why.
In order to understand the murderer, you really must talk to murderers.
We learn how they think. We do try to get into their minds and think like they do. Otherwise, we couldn't do the job that we're doing.
We're looking at the probably the more violent criminals of society, the serial murderer, the serial bomber, the serial arsonist, the child molester, the kidnappers, the product tamperers.
The scum of the earth.
That's right, they're the worst of mankind.
Douglas is talking about people like Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer in Milwaukee who mutilated his victims. Douglas's unit is called the Psych Squad, or the Mind Trackers. When a case is unsolved, they study clues from autopsy reports and the most unimaginably grisly crime scene photographs and come up with a psychological portrait. Ah! And what, he's just tortured her? He's just tortured her to
that's
death?
what happened in this crime scene.
What you have to look at is when you're looking at, I mean, we're looking at someone who's dead. For us to better understand the case, we're trying to imagine what this girl was experiencing at the time of the attack and what she would have been saying to the killer, and it would have been begging for a life. And
was she alive when he was...
Oh, sure. She was alive, throughout this.
I'm shaking inside because those pictures are so horrible. I don't know how you can do it over and over and over. I know I'm going to dream about it tonight.
Well, you won't be alone because there are many of us that deal with some of this through dreams also. They come back in their own way and impact the lives of us.
The agents are haunted not only by photographs of the tortured victims, but in some cases by their pleas and screams for mercy.
Well, what they do today is the subjects is that they will take audio tapes of the victims.
Subjects, you mean the murderers?
The murderers.
Yeah.
Because they don't kill week after week, and to keep the fantasy going, what they must do is they must make some type of audio tapes, in some cases videotapes of their victims. And so what they will do later on is in between each of the kills, they play back the tapes to themselves and relive it.
You have actual audio and videotapes of some of these
killers
doing the crime.
Doing the crime or torturing the victim. And then later on, they would play this back like you or I would listen to a piece of music.
The agents in the unit, Judd Ray, Jim Wright, and Pete Smerick, and the 8 others are swamped with work from state, local, even foreign police who send them their hardest to solve cases. We were allowed to sit in on a brainstorming session in a case from a police department in the Midwest. They wouldn't say exactly what city. The case was a brutal murder of a young woman, unsolved since 1984.
The body was lying in the center of the living room floor on its back, legs and arms was extended, and the throat was cut.
With the initial focus on the husband, the team begins studying the pictures of the crime scene and the victim.
There's not any display of anger from this guy that's excessive at all. So
2 hours later, the team begins drawing a profile.
I think we have a woman who was attacked probably for sexual assault, and she resisted, and his reaction was immediate physical infliction of injuries on her.
So I'm just wondering about his experience, having done this in the past. It seems to be limited.
I agree with you, Larry, and what points to that even more is just the manner of killing. I mean, this is pretty, not a feeble way, but kind of a haphazard way. Look at the wounds on this girl's neck. I mean, an experienced guy would have done what?
Yeah.
Decapitated her with the first blow, and that would have been it. You see them all the time.
Hesitate, like
There's some hesitation marks here.
And a more emotionally involved person would have done more too.
At the end, the mind tracker sent the police a detailed message. It ruled out the husband. Here's who you should be looking for, they said. A young white male in his early 20s who lived near the victim. He has a fairly menial job, probably not an alcohol or drug abuser.
What we're trying to do is sort of narrow the focus so that the investigators are not all over the board trying to look at all suspects.
We should go into this thing like the Lone Ranger, and then we should kind of, how the Lone Ranger would kind of ride off with Tonto, and who were those masked men? They leave the silver bullet behind. That's how I want us to act. I think that's why when the police get to know us, we're not a bad group down here.
Oh, come on! The police say you're that you hold seances and that you're weird and
seances.
You're sorcerers and that you're the Ouija board man.
Now, if they worked, if those seances worked, I'd use them. If the Ouija board worked, I'd be glad to use it.
They're not witch doctors. I mean, they're FBI agents. And
Tony Daniels, who heads the FBI Academy, is their boss.
A lot of them do have some background in psychology, but it's their investigative experience that's the key.
Judd Ray's investigative experience was close to home.
You were married to a woman who hired someone to kill you.
Yes, actually, 5 co-conspirators, 2 shooters.
You were shot by them?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted murder. Ray had been shot 3 times by the contract killers and almost died. Just before his wife hired the killers, she began playing the part of the perfect wife so she wouldn't be a suspect.
So who gave you the good news?
I did.
You solved it?
Well, yes, in a way, because I was saying things like, this is not a reprisal. I put a lot of people in jail, but they couldn't get that close. The only person that could get that close to me is someone that I trusted implicitly. And that person had to be her.
Douglas specializes in interviewing the most heinous criminals. He's interviewed Charles Manson, Richard Speck, and David, son of Sam Berkowitz. And he's been able to draw some general conclusions.
They love to talk about their crimes. They get off on it. They relive it again, but the thing that really turns them on is that no one really ever asks them specific questions about their crimes. Serial killers, like a lot of violent killers, they're manufactured. And they're manufactured by the parents as a result of some type of abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. The child begins reacting in a violent way. And what begins to form is known as the homicidal triangle. And you find instances of arson, instances of animal cruelty, as well as enuresis, which is bedwetting. In fact, with serial killers, almost without exception, they'll have either 2 or 3 of those characteristics in their background.
If I was a torturer, why would I have waited so long to start torturing? The torture and the pains didn't start until really after January 29th.
This is not a scene from Silence of the Lambs, but it could have been because Gary Heidnick is one of the men the killer in the movie was patterned after. As in the movie, the real-life Heidnick kept his victims in a pit in his basement where he raped and tortured them. Agents Douglas and Ray are on their way to talk to him on death row at the Pennsylvania State Prison in Pittsburgh. It'll be an interview that lasts 6 hours, an experience they hope will help them get into the mind of other ferocious criminals and torturers.
How much verbal exchange did you have with the girls down there in the basement?
At first, I tried to make it nice, right?
Yeah, how did you do that, Gary?
I was holding parties there for one thing. I had a Christmas party and a New Year's party.
Heidnick told agents Douglas and Ray that he had a routine for the women he held captive in his basement.
8, they go down in the hole in the morning, board goes over the top of the hole with the sandbags and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then they stay down there till roughly about 8 at night. Okay, now on this particular day...
Got a radio down here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Playing real loud?
Yes.
Why is that? To drown out any noise,
right.
In case because you're leaving the house sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't.
I was, I'm not holding nothing back. I realize that's incriminating. That's incriminating for me to say that in a state of mind. I was conscious enough to know that was a conscious act on my part, and that was essentially the reason.
To drown out that noise, for sure.
Well, they might like a little entertainment too, you know.
The radio didn't stop the women from screaming for help, so Gary Heidnick tried shocking them into silence with electricity.
You do say that you were electrocuted as punishment.
Yeah.
And you did that systematically for some time.
No. Only several days. Nothing was working. I was trying to find something that worked that would make them shut up to stop hollering.
So you got a progressive kind of infliction of pain on these women.
I was trying to find something that would make them behave.
But it was painful to them.
I hope so. I don't mean I hope so, but I mean, you know, that's what I was trying to achieve, you know, to make them behave.
After one of the victims died from torture, Heidnick told Douglas and Ray he didn't know what to do with the body.
I'm sitting there, you know, trying to figure out what the hell to do, you know? What the to do, you know? I started chopping up the body. It makes me sick just thinking about it. I dismembered the body and I you know, started burning it on the stove and in the oven and stuff, and that was when you got the big smell and all.
You're trying to destroy the evidence.
Right.
See, some people.
I consciously knew I was trying to hide the evidence.
Why do they kill?
The primary motivation is to manipulate and dominate and control that victim. How can this inadequate nobody, for the first time in his life, call the shots and decide whether or not this victim should live or should this victim should die?
Some agents have trouble distancing themselves from the horror stories like the one you just heard, so a lot transfer out of the unit. Many of those who stay find their health is affected. Skin rashes and ulcers are commonplace. Douglas keeled over and nearly died 7 years ago from viral encephalitis brought on by stress.
It's a different kind of work, and you just can't turn it off. And it's unlike other law enforcement work where, you know, like Jack Webb, just the facts, ma'am. Just give me the facts. Yeah. You leave the penitentiary sometimes, or you leave a crime scene, and you just cannot believe that someone could have done these acts to another person. And it is extremely difficult to detach your emotions. So you try to lose yourself in, you know, maybe reading a book if you can, or go out jogging, exercising.
You can't escape it.
Can't escape it. I walk into a park with my family, and I'm down by a stream. My eyes start looking around because this reminds me of previous crime scenes that I've been involved with in the past, and looking for the corpse. And the other agents out here will tell you the same thing, is you're always looking for signs like that.